Earlier we were discussing unions, unionization,
Yep.
and we were discussing how traditionally unions don't usually operate without government coercion.
Right. Okay.
I just wanted to know if you wanted to explore on that, maybe give a little historic precedent.
Okay. Yeah. I'll try. I mean, I could talk a long time on this. There's a chapter in my 33 Questions book that deals with unions. My father was a Teamster for 15 years, and he was very much a union man. But at the same time, he was very critical of actual Teamsters he knew, because in his experience, at least where he worked, he resented the fact that he worked very hard, he worked overtime, and then there were people who would have, an ingrowing toenail and take 6 months of, workman's comp or something. Now that's kind of a low blow, but with regard to unions, yeah, it is true that basically there is frankly always a coercive element here. There's always a coercive element involved. I was telling you that Henry George said, try to find a labor union that operates by means of moral suasion alone. You might as well be looking for tigers who live on oranges. There ain't no such thing. So, for one thing, just to say something about the role of unions, in the U.S., let's say in the 1920s, where actually, union membership in the U.S. has never topped about more than 1/3 of the labor force, much lower than in Europe. And for much of I think right now it might be 9%, it's something like that, and declining. In the 1920s, it was declining because you had a robust free market economy with wages rising, so people didn't feel like they needed unions. But in Europe, you had a much more heavily unionized workforce, but yet it was in the U.S. that much sooner that people got the 40-hour week, and that people got higher wages. And that's not just a coincidence. In my 33 Questions book, I have a chapter, What Made American Wages Rise? And the parentheses, hint, it wasn't unions or the government. And I explain exactly how it is on the free market that you invest in capital equipment, you invest in machinery that increases your ability to produce stuff. So now you have more stuff and roughly the same amount of people or the same amount of money. So the stuff is going to go down in price, relatively speaking, to wages. Wages will tend to stay up, the prices will come down. That's basically what's happened all through the 20th century. So I know the old story that without labor unions, everybody would be, working in conditions where, steel beams would be falling on their heads all day. And I don't mean to make light of this. I mean, people obviously did work in very, very bad conditions. But the point is that they worked in these bad conditions because the society itself was extremely poor. Like, we wouldn't help Bangladesh if we went over there and imposed the U.S. Code of Federal Regulations on them. We would destroy them. There's no way anything could get done. So there's always a trade-off. If all I cared about was safety, I would never leave my house or answer the door, right? I mean, I would never go up the stairs. So there's always a trade-off. Yes, I would like a safe workplace, but I would also like higher money wages. And people, in effect, have got to make that kind of trade-off. And so if your approach to helping people is to look at the option they chose and deprive them of that option, you're not helping them. Sometimes that's the best option they have, is a crummy job, but it's either that crummy job or nothing, a crummier job. It's not like it's this crummy job or magically I get to be a masseuse earning $5,000 an hour for a living. Like that, those are not the choices we're presented with. And then finally, what unions do in effect is they exclude people. That's the only way they can get above market wages is by forcibly excluding people. That is how they operate. And this is done usually by forcing the wage rate up to a point at which employers can't afford to hire more than a certain number of people. So what happens to those other people? Well, the people who are hired, they do benefit. What happens to the ones who can't get hired? Well, they have to go into some other line of work. They're trained for this line of work. They have special training for this line, but they can't break into it because of union restrictions. So what happens then? They have to go into some less skilled line of work where their skills don't match up quite as well. And now they're going to create a glut of labor in that sector and drive wages down in that sector. So not only do wages then come down over here, but now people who have skills, they can't use and exploit those skills. So it's as if they never acquired them in the first place. So society is shooting itself in the foot. We don't even get to exploit people in the good sense of the word, to the best, to the utmost, to allow them to use the skills they've acquired. They have to go to some other crummy area where they can't use the skills. So in other words, the lowering of wages elsewhere, it more than offsets the increase in wages in the unionized sector. But no one looks at this. They all say, hey, look at the unions. These people earn a lot of money. They don't look at it because they can't see or necessarily pinpoint or identify the people who have been deprived of employment because of this. No one knows who those people are. Those people themselves don't know who they are. They don't know that this is what caused their unemployment. And they're going to try and unionize this group. And then, so then people are going to be deprived of that. So it's always one intervention, as Mises said, causes problems, that the solution to which is considered to be more intervention, which causes further problems. So you need more intervention to the point where you choke off enterprise entirely. So I think a lot of the union stuff is mythology. It's not to say that employers have always been wonderful people. There have been some despicable employers, but there are despicable everything. Despicable dentists, despicable shoe salesmen, despicable ministers. That's not exclusive to employers. But the only way, in the long run, that everybody's wage can increase, not just some at the expense of others, everybody's wage, is by increasing the amount of capital per head in society. There is no shortcut to that, and that requires a free market unhampered by this sort of nonsense.